Welcome to Confessions of a Parent Coach. I'm parent coach, mother of four, and your host, Ann Kaplan. Welcome into another episode of the podcast, everybody. Excited to be here with you again. I love how I just said excited in this way that sounded like I was on Valium. Like, excited. I'm really excited. I really am excited, I swear, to be talking this week about this idea. It's just such a prominent idea. You know, it's interesting. I haven't it hasn't come up very recently for me in parent coaching, but it used to come up all the time. And I'm sure it's just a matter of time before it comes up again, which is this idea of like feeling like you don't want to discipline your kiddo because their behavior it's not their fault. And we'll talk more about that. But I have to start with my confession and I was trying to think I have so many, I know it's happened so many times in my parenting where I have not discipline my kiddo because I felt sorry for them, but I couldn't think of any specific examples. And if my kids were here right now, they'd all be like screaming examples at me, I'm sure. But then I realized I had a moment where I was on the receiving end of discipline where I felt like it wasn't my fault and I shouldn't be being, and it just happened yesterday. So, part of my practice, well, first of all, you might not even know this, but a huge part of my practice is not parent coaching at all. Parent coaching used to be my only kind of coaching. Now I would say it's about half the coaching that I do. And the other half is like this beautiful kaleidoscopic hodgepodge of business coaching, career coaching, relationship coaching, life coaching, and then also like doing Enneagram work for corporations and giving presentations and workshops for different organizations about the Enneagram and internal family systems and running my retreats and all of that great stuff. So, anyway, another part of that kaleidoscopic hodgepodge is that I am a contractor for the company that I first got my coaching certificate, my very first coaching certification, which now I have like a million different ones, but this was the first coaching certification I got was through an organization called IPEC. And they're an accredited coaching organization. You know, they have an international coaching federation certificate and all that great stuff. They're generally considered to be the gold standard in coaching certifications, if I do say so myself. And nowadays, part of that kaleidoscopic hodgepodge is being a contractor for IPEC. So I am a mentor coach to students who are going through the program. And then I'm also an assistant at their module trainings for students going through the program. And one of the requirements of being a mentor coach is attending live continuing ed trainings with my supervisor, like as a group, all of us mentor coaches go and monthly and have a live group meeting where we talk about whatever our boss recognizes is important for us to be on top of. So, we're listening to recordings this month. We've noticed that, such and such is happening for a lot of students during the close of their coaching session. So we want to alert you to that and really help you be really, honed into that for the students or whatever. And it's required for you to attend live at least 9 of those per year. And the ones that you don't attend, it is required that you watch the recording. And this fall has been like bonker balls crazy busy for me since we came back from our summertime at the lake in early August. It's actually insane. Like I've gone to Eugene, Oregon twice to help my kiddo both do his orientation and then move into his dorm. I went to Italy. I flew to Michigan and did the retreats out there. But also during all of that time, my husband has been to Hawaii, Cabo, California. He's going to Oklahoma next week. Like the two of us have not been in the same house for more than a week at a time. Suffice it to say, it's a really busy time of year. And I missed the September and the October group mentor coach meetings. And I got an email from my supervisor yesterday saying, hey, just a reminder, you have to come to these 9 sessions live at least throughout the year. And by the way, you've missed 3, and 2 of them you haven't even watched the recordings for. And my first reaction was this part of me that came up that was just like, do you even understand how busy I've been? Like, get off my back. Which obviously that is not the part that I use to respond to my supervisor. But I had this feeling of like, it's not my fault. I have a really good reason why I haven't watched these videos. Throw me a bone, dude. And what do I mean when I say throw me a bone? It means like I don't deserve this slap on the wrist. Like, don't 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 tase me, bro. That just came out of my mouth. Um, I got really defensive. And that when I was trying to like scan my brain for like, what's my confession? What's my confession? Is like, oh, I get it. My confession is that we all feel that way sometimes, not just as the parent who needs to hold a boundary for our kid, but we feel for them because, we get why they're behaving the way they are and it's quote unquote not their fault. But also for ourselves, like we know how it feels to like get called out on something, and our first thought is like, I get that I broke the rule, but it's not my fault. And so I don't it's not fair that I'm getting this, slap on the wrist email from my supervisor. Well, that's not true at all. Both of those things can simultaneously exist, right? Like I did break a rule. I haven't been up on watching the replays of these. They are very important for me to watch. Like I watched them yesterday and both of them I was like taking notes because like, oh my gosh, this is super useful. Oh, I have a session with a student today. I'm going to use this. Very, very useful. It's an important rule that exists. And also it's not really for me to say if it's important or not. It's a rule. These are the conditions of my employment as a contractor for IPAC. And just because I have really reasonable reasons why I'm missing, those recordings, I still need to be held to that standard. And the fact that it's like, quote unquote, not my fault is kind of irrelevant. But that's not what I thought in the moment. That's not what you think in the moment when you're disciplining your kiddo, maybe. And it's probably not what your kiddo thinks in the moment either. So let's talk about this. And just as I was talking about my experience, I occurred to me that I have a student who has ghosted, like a no-show, like 3 times throughout the time that I've been working with him. And there's also a rule for IPAC that if you don't cancel within 24 hours or more and you don't show up to your appointment, you get a $50 fee. And I've had to give him that fee like every time. It's out of my hands because I'm just have to implement the protocols that IPAC holds. But I'm just like, that's another example. It's like I'm sure he had all really important and reasonable reasons why he didn't show up. And also $50 each time. Okay, so let's talk about this idea of like, what if a kid's misbehavior is not their fault? Because if you ever feel guilty disciplining your kiddo when it feels like their behavior isn't their fault, you are not alone. A couple of great examples could be like a toddler who's like hitting people, but they're hungry and tired. So you might be looking at this kiddo just flailing around and smacking people in the face and thinking this kid needs to eat and take a nap, and he wouldn't be acting this way if he were full and rested, which you're probably right. Right. Or how about like a teenager who's just having like a crazy hormone surge and they start slamming doors and raging at people, which is like every teenager at some point, right? We get it. They're going through adolescence. Like this is how teenagers behave. They're crazy. They get super extreme, intense emotions. We get it. And still, they can't be going around slamming doors, but you might feel guilty disciplining them because it's like, oh, God, I remember when I was out of control as a teenager too. Like those feelings are just so intense, right? Or like kids who are like really train wrecks around transitions, like coming home from school. Or a really common one is kids when their mom and dad don't live in the same house, or 2 parents don't live in the same house, and the child has to transition from one parent's house to the other parent's house. Oftentimes kids are really just super dysregulated around that transition. Well, we get it. We get why that is. Like transitions are hard for some kids. And when they're going through that thing that's really hard for them, they might just have total meltdowns, we understand why these kids and all these examples are behaving the way they are. And yet their behavior is something that we need to do something about, right? We need to respond to it, not just excuse it. Or you may have heard me say before, just because a behavior is understandable doesn't mean it's excusable. But why is that like such a hard concept for us to really get? And I think the reason why is because most of us were raised to see discipline as punishment, meaning you slam doors, that's naughty. You're being naughty, your behavior is bad, you're bad, and you need a punishment. And I mean, when you get down to it, and I'm going to be very pedantic and maybe even like a little hyperbolic here just to illustrate this point, but like that's a punitive approach to discipline, right? And punitive discipline kind of assumes that a child who's behaving badly is doing so from bad intent, that they're bad, they're naughty. And if we see discipline as equal to punishment, and if we see discipline as a response to naughtiness, of course it's going to feel confusing and wrong to discipline a child whose misbehavior is like quote unquote no fault of their own. Tired and hungry toddlers, hormonal teenagers, sensitive kiddos, they're not bad. They're not naughty. So why would we discipline them? We know they don't have bad intentions, so they don't deserve a punishment, which is completely true. They don't deserve a punishment, but they do need discipline because like this is like the huge fallacy. And I took me a really long time as a parent coach to realize that me just even using the word discipline, because I never use the word punishment because I'm not teaching my children I'm not teaching my children. I'm also not teaching my clients to punish their kids. It took me a long time to realize that discipline was basically just like a fancier word for punishment to a lot of people. And when I would talk about disciplining their kids, they really saw it as like being mean. But the truth is that discipline and punishment are not the same. Giving a kiddo a loving, compassionate consequence for hitting, that's not the same as a punishment. And so when we can understand that those things are different, it becomes a lot easier to stick with discipline. And in fact, giving kids those loving sort of what's the word I want to use, like bumpers, like we use at the bowling alley, giving kids that kind of like guardrails, those loving guardrails, is how kids learn to get better at these things that they're struggling with through no fault of their own. Not just discipline. We also want to be bringing emotional attunement and connection to our parenting. But a kiddo who hits when they're upset, we totally get it. You're a toddler, you're trying hitting is a strategy that almost all toddlers try. I'm not upset about it. That understanding is a vehicle for regulation in the parent, not excusing the behavior in the child. So I can understand that my toddler is hitting for really normal, perfectly blatantly obvious reasons. So I'm calm in my heart. I'm not upset about it. I'm not losing my temper, even though I just got smacked in the face by my 2-year-old. And I'm teaching my 2-year-old when I say, we don't hit. That's too bad. It looks like we need to be apart from each other for a little while. And I put my kiddo down on the floor and take some space, for example, if that's the consequence you decide to give. That's a really beautiful way for that child to not be shamed, not be, scared by my intense reaction or anything like that, loving reaction. And it's a great way or a piece of how this child can learn that when I'm upset, actually hitting isn't the answer. I'm going to learn other things to do instead, which is something that can happen between a parent and a child after that disciplinary moment. But if there's no downside to these dysregulated behaviors, it's really actually confusing and hard for kids to learn to choose different behaviors. So the fact that you understand why your kid is doing what they do is a very, very beautiful thing. And we're just using it for the wrong reasons, right? Like we're using our understanding to excuse their behavior instead of using our understanding to bring understanding to our discipline. So when we parent with this more authoritative way that I'm describing, our kids' world becomes stable and it makes sense. Their behavior has predictable outcomes and they get to decide how to act with that information going forward. If we modify the rules or consequences in these tricky situations, it only confuses the kids. And they're already dealing with a lot. That's why they're behaving this way, right? They're already overwhelmed. They're already dysregulated. You know, for example, with that toddler again, being tired and hungry is hard. And putting them in a changing and unpredictable world at the same time that they're tired and hungry only makes it worse. So it's no surprise that kids in these situations wind up becoming even more dysregulated and poorly behaved because the rules and consequences are kind of all over the place. So part of, my job as a parent coach, when I am doing parent coaching, is helping my clients get to that place where they can utilize their understanding in a really beautiful, healthy way where we can like leverage that compassion to up level your parenting instead of having it be this like Achilles heel of your parenting. And it might involve, all the personal growth work you've heard me talk about in the past. It might just be as simple as helping you understand, like, actually, you're not being mean when you discipline your child, and discipline and punishment are really not the same thing. So if you're feeling that kind of like murkiness about the difference between discipline and punishment, if you're feeling murky about when you should be giving consequences or like how to give consequences or which consequences to give, like this is all my jam. So set up that free discovery call that you hear me talk about every week and come and tell me all about it. That call is something that's always available to you. You've heard me talk about it a million times. Like, it's just a really beautiful moment for you to kind of share your story with me, get my input on it and feedback about it. We can talk about what it looks like to work together. And if it feels good to you, we can move forward. And if it doesn't, we don't. And either way, you're going to be having a beautiful, tuned in conversation about something that's super, super important to you. Otherwise, you wouldn't have set up the session for yourself. So go ahead and book it if you haven't done it already. And I will talk to you again next week. Bye, everybody. The episode is over, but there's more waiting for you. You can grab my free workbook, Getting Kids to Listen the First Time, that walks you through the fundamental principles I teach all of my clients and applies them to this very universal parenting challenge. So if you're sick of repeating yourself all day long or just want to learn more about my style, you'll definitely want to go to bit.ly/kidswholisten. And if you're ready to work with me, let's meet. Set up a free call at bit.ly/Kaplan call, and let's create an action plan that gets you exactly where you want to go. And of course, links to all this goodness are in the show notes. Thanks for joining, and I'll see you next time.